This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
This podcast is supported by Google. Hey folks, Stephen Johnson here, co-founder of NotebookLM. As an author, I've always been obsessed with how software could help organize ideas and make connections. So we built NotebookLM as an AI-first tool for anyone trying to make sense of complex information. Upload your documents, and NotebookLM instantly becomes your personal expert, uncovering insights and helping you brainstorm. Try it at notebooklm.google.com.
How do you go about choosing the right large language model for your company and the right model for the right job? And how can you evaluate it and understand if you're actually getting a ROI on Gen AI? This is something I've literally talked to hundreds of companies about over the past 3 years. And today, I think it's important, now more than ever, as large language models are slowly morphing under our eyes into AI operating systems, it's important we talk about how to do this for front-end AI models, because I do think that's the future. That's where work happens as your everyday ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., are becoming places of work and where teams go to get work done. So today we're going to go over what's the best LLM for your team and the 7 steps to evaluate and create ROI for AI. I'm excited for today's show. I hope you are too. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Everyday AI. My name is Jordan Wilson. We do this thing every single day. It's a live stream, podcast, and free daily newsletter helping us all make sense of AI, but how we can actually leverage it to grow our companies and our career. So if you're a stressed out business leader trying to keep up and you're like, how the heck can I when there's new AI advancements every day? It starts here with the live stream podcast. But to take it to the next level, make sure to go to our website at youreverydayai.com. Sign up for the free daily newsletter. We're going to be recapping both today's show and keeping you up to date with all of the latest AI news from today. So let's get into it. ROI is important, right? But how do you evaluate it? Don't get me wrong. There's great resources out there, scientific benchmarks, evaluation sites that look at large language models. But here's the issue. They're just looking at the models themselves. They're looking mainly if you're using one of these big APIs, but that's not how companies are using AI now. Something I've been thinking about a lot over the last year or so. I've been one of the first people, I think, shouting and screaming about this AI operating system thing. And now, as these AI chatbots are turning into full-fledged operating systems, now people are understanding, oh, maybe we shouldn't just be using models on the back end via an API connection, and maybe we should be using them in their interface because they're so much more powerful when you have access to all of these different modes and features that aren't available when you're using an API. So now we've seen this influx of large enterprise teams moving away from using models just via the API, or now bringing more of their team, but putting them, on a Teams or an enterprise plan for ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, etc. But now we're left with this problem again. How do we evaluate this? Well, on today's show, we're going to go over the common traps that businesses make when trying to evaluate AI models on the front end. We're going to share the best publicly available large language model evals to at least get you a jump start. And we're going to lay out in detail our 7-step plan for evaluating AI models for AI. Live stream audience, good to see you. What's going on? If you guys have any questions, good morning, Jason on YouTube. Douglas, good to see you. If you guys have a question, feel free to drop it. I like when I can get in a couple of questions. So if you have any, let's get them in. But first of all, who is this show for? I think this is for teams and organizations that are evaluating using front-end AI chatbots as their AI operating system of choice. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this concept of an AI operating system that's finally now picking up steam, even though I've been talking about it for more than a year, and why I think now is a more important time than ever to be talking about this concept of model evaluations on the front end, and how you can create and protect ROI. Because if your team is not properly trained and doesn't understand how large language models work, especially on the front end with all of these new modes that are being added all of the time, you might end up spending more time in AI than you would if you weren't doing it with AI, which is why I think it's important to evaluate these models and to go through this step. Why now? Right? Well, now I think the rest of the world is finally caught up to what I've been saying for a very long time. I think more and more smart organizations are starting to move their day-to-day business processes inside the front end of a large language model. So if you're brand new here, let me explain the difference between this back-end API, front-end operating system, right? So I think in 2023, in the earlier days, 2024, larger enterprise organizations essentially, they fine-tuned these models from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, for their own use. They built RAG pipelines, and they essentially created versions of these large language models for their employees to use internally, right? And those are a little bit easier to evaluate. It's strictly you're working with a model. There's an API. There's benchmarks for certain categories of work, right? There's great benchmarks out there. These models are great for coding. These models are great for creative writing. These models are, great for multi-step research, et cetera. So when you're using an API and you have a little bit more of a narrow scope, it's a little bit easier to evaluate these models and to measure ROI. But I don't think that's how most people should be using them, right? I like to think of an actual operating system. In the 90s, most companies or early 2000s had to make a choice on their operating system. Are you going to be a Microsoft Windows organization? Are you going to be Mac OS? Are you going to be Linux, right? And then from there, you essentially built your processes around those operating systems, right? When operating systems became, popularized in the 90s, work before computers kind of had to be reworked and reorganized around what an operating system offered. And I think that's the junction that we're at right now. Smart organizations are understanding, maybe using, at least for average, your average knowledge worker, right? Obviously, if you're a coding shop, if you're a niche company or a niche department, this is not for you. I'm talking about for the everyday knowledge worker, right? People in marketing, HR, sales, right? Not necessarily, people just doing coding tasks, because I think that's a little more cut and dry. And now there's this whole concept, especially after OpenAI earlier this week announced a couple of things at their dev day, but one of the biggest ones was apps. So bringing in entire apps into the ChatGPT experience. I'm going to do a show on that later, but essentially what that means, and I think this is something that the other Frontier Labs are going to be doing, is you're going to be working with your own business context and using entire user interfaces from other websites, all within ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, etc. So we need to start unlearning the old way of working with AI, and we need to relearn how to move our day-to-day processes inside one of these systems, because that is going to be the best and fastest way to work. Just like, well, you probably could have figured out in the 90s, MacGyvering a way to not use one of those three big operating systems. But if you wanted to succeed, you had to. I think you have to make that same choice now. So here's the problem. Even front-end AI systems are complicated, confusing, and change too often without notice. Here's a good example. So for the podcast audience, I have something on my screen here. If you ever want the video version, make sure to go to our website at youreverydayai.com. You can watch the video version there. Click on episodes. Right now, this whole ChatGPT thing, going to GPT-5 was supposed to make things easier, right? It didn't. It made things more complicated. And this is why I think it's important to look at maybe our company shouldn't just be using an API, and maybe we should be moving our processes inside of one of these team modes, right? So obviously, all the big AI models, you can have a team account, an enterprise account, bring thousands of users. You can share projects, share GPTs, share chats, right, through most of the front end AI chatbots. But it's confusing now. So even if you look at ChatGPT, on my ChatGPT screen, let me count them here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 10 different models that I can choose from. Okay, that's not easy, right? You have all the different variations of GPT-5, Auto, Instant, Thinking Mini, Thinking, and Pro. And then you have your legacy models, GPT-4o, GPT-4.1, GPT-4.5, O3, O4 Mini. Confusing. And then even in the thinking mode, you have, I think, 4 or 5 different layers of thinking. So I have more than a dozen, and many teams have more than a dozen just models they can choose from just in ChatGPT. All right. It's not as bad in Gemini, right? There's essentially 2. Claude is a little, in between. I think there's about 6 different models. But then you talk about modes. And this is where you don't get this if you're just working on the back end via an API. And these modes are where the magic happen. So using modes like connectors, and all the major players have their version of connectors. This brings your dynamic data, essentially creating a mini version of retrieval augmented generation or RAG pipelines with your company's dynamic data. There's the deep research mode, agent mode, right? I'm going over the modes in ChatGPT, image gen mode, web search, Canvas, which is so underrated, study and learn, right? Advanced voice mode. So would you rather, going back, right? Think of those of you that, worked in the 90s and the early internet days. Imagine if you had a computer with no programs, right? No office programs, no terminal, no nothing. That's kind of what I feel if your company is only using something via an API. And this is why I think the smartest teams have already made the jump to doing a ChatGPT business plan, a ChatGPT enterprise plan, Google Gemini team plan, Claude enterprise plan, because you need to take advantage of these modes. These modes, right? Difference between models and modes are where work happens. So why then, if this is where work needs to happen, and we know AI is so good and so powerful, and we see all these studies, it's so much faster, more efficient, better than humans. Well, why do most companies never find an ROI? Let me give you the reasons. The pilots are always too long. You can't do a year-long pilot in AI. That's you're failing before you start. Change management and training are basically non-existent in most, even large organizations. I'm constantly shocked. The lack of change management that gets invested, as well as training. Companies aren't training their people. It's weird. Also, not properly measuring pre-GenAI human input efforts. How long did these projects take before there was AI, right? We don't have baselines. We don't have, if you want to talk about ROI, what is it, right? You have to calculate the time that it takes for your people to do a project. You have to calculate any hard costs, right? Software, expenditures, whatever. But people didn't measure this before AI. So there's no baseline to compare it to. Also, I think sometimes one lucky run is celebrated when it comes to AI, but variance and reliability are never measured. Generative AI is generative, right? So a lot of times companies find like one use case and then they just roll that very small use case out to everyone without properly testing it, right? Generative AI can be kind of like a roll of the dice sometimes. So you have to keep that in mind. And then last, but definitely not least, one of the most common traps of companies not finding ROI on Gen AI is the shiny object AI syndrome, right? Every single week and multiple times a week, there are shiny distractions, right? I just talked about OpenAI's big announcements. We're going to have big announcements this week, and we've already had some big announcements from Google. I'm sure we're going to see next week, right? I do this every day. I've been doing this every day for 3 years. There's a shiny object every single week, multiple times, and companies get too easily distracted by that. So let's talk about evaluations, right? If we're going to talk about how and go over these 7 steps to evaluate, what are evals, right? So AI evals are essentially structured quality checks for AI systems. They're important, especially for generative AI, because you can run the same input and get wildly different outputs. That's how generative AI works, which is why evaluations are extremely important. So using these ensures reliability. So evals verify the AI performs its task consistently and correctly. You're able to catch risk. So evals identify issues like bias and errors before the AI is used kind of by the rest of your company. And also this helps guide improvements, right? To get the most out of Gen AI, you have to constantly be iterating and kind of going in a cycle of improvement and feedback. And that's what evals help do. So they provide data-driven insights to help your team fix and refine the AI that you're using. And then there are some great publicly available eval sites to get started, right? Because yes, I mentioned ChatGPT, and they currently have like 12 different models, right? Claude, when you're using it on, and I'm talking front end, chatgpt.com, Claude.ai, Gemini.google.com. There's multiple models to choose from, but there's good places to start looking at evals. Okay. Yes, there are scientific benchmarks, but there's other great resources to at least get started, right? Because I'm not saying that one model or one mode is going to be best for every single project, task, or deliverable for your company. You might have to use multiple, right? You might have some people, you might have 100 employees on a ChatGPT Teams plan, and you might have, 200 on a Claude Enterprise plan. So where do you get started? Well, most of these publicly available AI eval sites look at different scientific benchmarks as well as user benchmarks. And then depending, like LM Arena is a good example. We talk about this a lot on the show, but with LM Arena, you can go on there. You essentially have a battle. Okay. You put in one prompt, you get 2 different responses from a large language model. You choose which one is better. You don't see which model it is. It's a blind LLM taste test. And then after millions of votes, obviously, you start to see which models are best. And then also they classify what this was about. Was this a creative writing prompt? Was it a factual test? Was it a coding task? Right? Was it math? Was it science? So not only do you get scores, these are called ELO scores, but you're also able to classify them across different arenas, right? So if you're looking for if you're a web development team, you can go look at that. If you're a creative writing department, you can go look at that. So different evals classified across different categories. LM Arena, I think, is one of the best public eval sites. Next, LiveBench. Similarly, they look across, reasoning, coding, agentic coding, mathematics, data analysis, all these different things. Then they look at all the different variations of the models as well. Another great one is Epoch AI. They have their AI benchmarking across different categories as well. And then last but not least, this is a newer one. I like this from Scale, their CLLM leader. So a lot of these look at different aspects, right? Because your team, especially if you're a larger organization, like I said, you might end up using multiple of the big platforms, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Although it's always best to bring everyone under one roof. Sometimes, right? Especially like, let's say something like coding, right? Claude is very popular for software development teams. So maybe you have a team running on that and the rest of your team's on ChatGPT or Gemini. All right. We're going to get into the 7 steps. I had to lay the groundwork first. But before we get into them, very quick word from our sponsors.
This podcast is supported by Google. Hey folks, Stephen Johnson here, co-founder of NotebookLM. As an author, I've always been obsessed with how software could help organize ideas and make connections. So we built NotebookLM as an AI-first tool for anyone trying to make sense of complex information. Upload your documents, and NotebookLM instantly becomes your personal expert, uncovering insights and helping you brainstorm. Try it at notebooklm.google.com.
All right. I had to go through the prerequisites of laying the groundwork first. I couldn't just jump in and give you the 7 steps, but now I think we're ready to go through them. So before we get started, just a little precursor things to remember. All right. You have to plan your evaluation sprint first. You need to get written buy-in from, executive sponsors, whoever that may be, end users, IT security, all that, right? So here I am crossing my T's, dotting my I's, right? You need to get the clearance. If you have to go take this through legal, right? What data can we upload? What can we not, right? This is all I got to get my fine print out of the way, because you can't just follow exactly what I say. You got to get the fine print. All right. Also, first, like I said, use public benchmarks to start to see which models you should start to evaluate. And then you need to plan a 2 to 4 week sprint testing just one workflow. Freeze your model choice and ignore all shiny new objects. All right. Here we go. Step 1, define your success criteria before you start testing. You need to literally write a job description for this pilot, right? For this test. You need to explicitly identify the specific outcome, the constraints, the tools that you're going to be using or allowed, and then any do not do actions, okay? You need to set clear ground rules because, again, these models and modes are always changing. So, if good example, right? A good example, ChatGPT just launched their apps. If you were midway through and you're like, oh yeah, we could use this app for that. No, you said, this is what we're doing. We're not doing anything else, okay? You got to set your do's and your don'ts. Then you need to create a rubric, a grading rubric, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever works best for you, defining exactly what makes each eval or test pass or fail. All right. So essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to be identifying use cases, right? It could be, parsing certain information from long PDFs and turning it into a table and a chart, right? That's an easy example. That's a use case that probably a lot of companies might do, right? There's a big industry white paper that comes out every month, and your team has historically gone through it manually, pulled out certain insights, and put those insights into a chart or a table, right? You need something measurable that you can define the success criteria before testing, something that has a very finite beginning and end that you can measure. Right. And then you need to choose for each of these different use cases, choose 3 to 5 simple KPIs that the workflow impacts. Number 1, obviously, is human time spent, accuracy, revisions required, value created, etc. Right? Because there's some things that might be gray area. Try not to, with your success criteria and your KPIs, try not to choose anything that's too gray. Right? Try to choose as many black and white things as you can, right? And there's different ways you can grade it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's step 1, define your success criteria before you start testing. Step 2, measure your human baseline first. I don't understand why no one's doing this. This is mind-boggling to me. Literally, you have people out there running, big organizations running AI pilots. And, they'll tell me about it. They'll be like, okay, we ended up doing this project, here's how long it took, et cetera. And then I'm like, okay, what was it when pre-GenAI? And they're like, oh, well, we didn't benchmark it. It's like, okay, benchmark it now. Do that exact same thing without any AI, right? I've been talking about this for years. It's very simple. You need to time multiple employees. It depends on how big your team is, right? If it's a smaller team, if you're running this through a champion team, a lot of times, people identify their champion teams and it's like 8 to 10 people. So it depends on the size of your team, but you need to have multiple employees run through the entire process. And a lot of companies aren't willing to do that. Y'all, you need to invest. In the same way that you need to invest training and education, learning and development around AI, you need to sometimes have multiple employees do this. And I think so many businesses are hesitant because they look at this as waste. They're like, why would this is a 40-hour project, right? Why would I have 3 to 5 employees do this same project? And if it's just for an internal use case, okay, well, You see all these studies about 60 to 70% time savings when using large language models. Well, do you want that? Well, if so, you got to get the pre-GenAI human benchmark. You need to calculate the average time, error rate, rework minutes, cost per completed task. You need to measure the human input and output. This is your baseline. And this will ultimately prove whether the AI actually saves time or not. Without it, you're just guessing. Stop guessing. Step 3, you need to build a realistic and controllable test data set. All right. So whether this is synthetic data related to your company, whether it's publicly available data, in your industry, whether it's data about competitors, whatever it is, you need a finite and a realistic data set. You need to gather 20 to 40 actual work examples. You need to have messiness, right? Don't start with something that's too clean, too structured, too organized, right? Both for the humans and the AI. You need to really have a real data set. Also, I would add 6 drift cases, rename files, dead links. You need to put actual traps in there, both for humans and for AI. So again, you're not going to have the team that's ultimately testing this on the human side, building this use case. You need to have other people, right? But you need to build traps because especially when we talk about agentic models, you can't just hold their hand, right? You have to hope that if they encounter a problem, they will adapt and overcome it, just like hopefully a human would. And then you also need to create a pass-fail checklist for each case tied directly to your rubric. Step 4, you need to configure your workspace like production. Okay, so you need to set up properly. You need to set up the shared workspace matching real permissions with the right tools and the models that users will ultimately have. So what do I mean by that? I don't know why. So many organizations, they're like, I'm not going to pay for AI. I'm going to use the free one. Stop, right? You need to be using the exact same mode or model that you want to be using on the front end or on once this goes live with the rest of your team, right? Sometimes that might mean paying for the super expensive $200 a month plan, right? Because there's certain features that are only available on those plans. So it might mean that, all right? Also, you need to document the configuration, which model, which tools can be used, which connectors, who has what access level. Make sure that the people on the team have access to the same documents, right? Then you need to verify during the test that the AI uses the expected tools, not workarounds or guessings. This is the other thing. So many people don't know prompt engineering basics. So many people don't. All right. This is probably where, even if you follow this, steps 1 through 7, this is probably where you're going to fail. Most people have no clue how to prompt an AI. They don't. And well, why do I know this? Well, people don't even know how to select the right model, right? CEO Sam Altman recently said around the GPT-5 launch that only, I think, 7% of paid users used thinking models, which is an absolutely asinine thing to think about, right? Why would anyone choose models that are worse? This just shows most humans have no clue what they're doing when they're using large language models. You need to use the right model, the right mode, and the right prompting techniques. You got to know the basics. All right. Step 5. Generative AI is generative. You don't do one-offs. You run this multiple times. I'd say you need to run at least this trial 3 times, both with your humans and on the AI side, and demand proof. You need to repeat each test case 3 times in separate chats, right? So turn off, depending on what front-end AI chatbot you're using, but you're probably going to want to turn off memory. If you're using ChatGPT as an example, or all the front-end AI large language models have something like this, you're going to want to turn off memory. You're going to want to turn off past chat history, to make sure that it's not pulling from other things. You also need to require working citations, file paths, or artifacts for every accepted answer, no exceptions. And then you need to calculate the reliability score. right? So when you are creating this rubric on the front end, you need to know how it's going to be scored on the back end. Because again, y'all, generative AI is generative. You need to be very detailed in how you're going to score this thing. And then you need to run it through multiple times with humans and with AI systems, because sometimes generative AI might get it right. Sometimes it might get it wrong. Step 6, you need to calculate the real ROI with objective grading, right? Depending on the resources you have internally, I would have the grading be from someone that doesn't know which ones are human and which ones are AI, right? So this might also require you having a certain output to where human graders wouldn't be able to tell which one came from a human and which one came from an AI. So what that means, right, until the models get perfect, this might mean you have a one person or a small team go through and make sure that the formatting in the layout is the same between the AI created outcomes and the human created outcomes, just to make sure you remove biases from whoever is ultimately grading, right? So simple example, right? A lot of times large language models will cite things in line, right? So you don't want to just copy and paste that over, because someone's going to know, oh, this is from an LLM. And then they might, depending on their objective and their agenda, they might grade it accordingly, either better or worse. So you need to have that kind of blind taste test, right? Whoever is testing or grading on the rubric can't know what came from AI and what came from a large language model. So same thing, right? Maybe it's a page minimum, page maximum, whatever it is. You need to make sure that it is consistent and that human graders won't know the difference. So then ultimately, you need to use the automated checks for citations and accuracy, and the humans can grade for tone and quality. You need to convert time savings to dollars using a fully loaded rate, and then subtract the subscription costs, right? Whatever you're paying for these AI systems for net ROI, right? So do this across the course of a month, because that's, you're paying for these AI systems monthly, and then you need to report at least 7 factors. And this is going to vary depending on your industry, your department, your type of work, et cetera. But I think these 7 factors are pretty good to keep a look at. So cost, latency, accuracy, stability, safety, integration, and compliance, right? Because you don't want an AI going off the rails and doing something against company policies in the same way you wouldn't want a human doing something, right? Safety, same thing. Accuracy, same thing. All right. Stability. Will an AI system do great the first 3 runs and then go off the rails the next 3? You need to be measuring these things and reporting on them as well. All right. And then step 7, you need to retest this monthly to track changes. All right. Here's something most people don't know. Let me just pull this out as an example. Let's say for whatever reason, you're using GPT-5 thinking as your model of choice, and then you're using Canvas mode. Okay. Canvas mode gets updated often. Most people, unless you're a dork like me, don't know this. GPT-5, it's gotten updated, GPT-5 thinking has gotten updated multiple times since it came out, since August. Most people don't know, right? There's actually a thinking slider now, right? GPT-5 Auto just got updated this week, and you probably didn't know it, right? That's why you have to retest monthly to track changes. Okay, you don't necessarily have to retest the human input output, right? Because that in theory is not going to change, or maybe you need to, do that at least quarterly or yearly, because, it depends on, again, it depends on your use case, but at least on the AI side, you don't just do this once, set it and forget it, because it could get marginally better. It could get increasingly worse. Again, it depends. It depends on what these big AI companies are doing under the hood. All right. You need to retest, though, immediately anytime a provider ships model updates. So a lot of times they're doing these under the hood, and you might not know unless you're reading the change log, but you probably should be reading the change log. And if there is a noted model change, you need to rerun the test immediately. Not doing so is negligence, right? AI changes all the time. And the other thing is, you still need human in the loop. right? You still need human in the loop, both on the testing phase and ultimately once you deploy this. And once you get to the point where, yes, we've measured ROI in step 6, right? We've taken this to production. It doesn't end there. You still need your human in the loop or expertise-driven loop, like I like to say. And then you need to retest monthly to track the changes. And also, you need to track your trends versus a 3-month average. And you need to investigate if the accuracy or savings drop significantly. Like I said, what I just took you through, this 7-step plan, this is for one type of project. Again, let's go back to my easy, simple example, right? You have a team or one individual that spends 40 hours a month going through this large industry white paper, pulling out, synthesizing, personalizing information for your company and turning it into a little bit of a document, right? Going through this 100-page report. Here's everything that applies to us. Here's some spreadsheets. Here's some graphs, etc. Right? That's a simple example. A large language model can obviously do that, but what's the 3-month trend line look like? Is it getting better over time? Is it getting worse over time? Because if it's slowly getting marginally worse month over month, then you probably need to revisit the model, right? Going back to looking at the publicly available model evals. So you need to also go through this depending on your use case or potential use cases. You might need to run this through multiple models. And sometimes you might want to do this in tandem. You might want to be testing, Gemini 2.5 Pro alongside, GPT-5 thinking as an example, right? And you need to be constantly reevaluating. One thing people are almost confused about, at least those companies that have already seen and measured their ROI on Gen AI, right? They're like, okay, well, what do we do now, right? You have 2 choices. You can cut people. Well, technically 3, but one is you can reduce headcount, and you do that either by laying people off or you stop hiring and let churn and attrition do its thing, which is what the latter, I think, is what a lot of bigger companies are doing. They just stopped hiring. And then they're just, eating up these efficiency gains with AI. Or you can do something else, right? You can say, hey, we have huge time savings from AI, so let's start investing in new lines of revenue. Well, how do you do that? This, right? Every single medium-sized business and up. Not all small businesses can do this, but if you have 100 employees or more, which is the majority of everyone listening to this process that I outlined, this takes humans. You need to have AI testing and deployment teams. Even if you're a medium-sized organization, right? I'm not talking, this is only for Fortune 1000 companies. No, you need a team of me's. That's what you need. You need a team of people who are constantly paying attention to AI updates, constantly evaluating different models, and keeping a very close eye on these use cases. That's how you get successful AI implementation. You have to invest in the people that are pushing you forward. All right. I hope this was helpful, y'all. As always, put together a little guide. All right. So if something in this struck you and you're like, yeah, my team needs to hear this, but we need a little bit more than this podcast, I obviously put together an extended guide. So if you're listening on LinkedIn, go ahead and repost this show. I'll send it over to you. It's hot, fresh, like Little Caesars pizza, ready to go. But if you're listening on the podcast, always check the show notes, okay? In the show notes, there's a link to this LinkedIn post, right? Each of our live stream podcasts goes out on LinkedIn. So if you want access to the guide, go find in your show notes on Spotify or Apple Music, whatever you're listening to, go click that and then go repost this and I'll send that over to you. So I hope today's show was helpful. If so, make sure you go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for the free daily newsletter. We're going to be recapping the highlights and main points from today's show and keeping you the smartest person in AI at your company. So thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
This podcast is supported by Google. Hey folks, Steven Johnson here, co-founder of NotebookLM. As an author, I've always been obsessed with how software could help organize ideas and make connections. So we built NotebookLM as an AI-first tool for anyone trying to make sense of complex information. Upload your documents and NotebookLM instantly becomes your personal expert, uncovering insights and helping you brainstorm. Try it at notebooklm.google.com.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.